Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the press conference of the film Living and Other Fictions, a special projection within the official section of the 64th edition of the San Sebastian Film Festival. And to talk about this film, we have the director, Joe Sol, the cast, Jose Rovira and Antonio Centeno, and the producer, Luis Miñarro. Also, the actresses Zamperillo, Aranzazu, and Ruiz, who are with us, and they can intervene if they want to. And also, Afra Gargamonti, who is the editor and also the photographer, does the photography in the film. Perhaps, Joe, could you explain this is a special project, which is Living in Other Fictions, your film? I'll try, because it's a film. There are a lot of things at the same time, but the essence of what it is, it's a sample, a very urgent film. It's like, and it's also called, it's another way of saying it, using other words. I prefer to call it an urgent film instead of a poor film. It's a film that puts in the middle, in the focus, a content matter, which contributes values to a series of discourses that don't belong to it, because for a long time, and they are being deconstructed, but some of the people that are significant do participate in the construction of that content, and what it wants to contribute are certain. It tries to cover the expectations that any film tries to achieve, but it does displace the artistic to one side to situate in and focus specifically upon that discourse. Okay, I'm not too sure whether there are any questions. Yes, over here on the left. Oh, hi. She's speaking in congratulations from Catalonia Radio. I think the document, well, you haven't seen the same film as I. It's not a documentary. Oh, well, sorry. Excuse me. Sorry, my question was precisely, that's what I meant. They say, what is it fiction and what is the reality? Because it's a bit ambiguous. And there are moments that I was asking myself, if this is true, how did they do? How did they shoot all of this? Because, excuse me if I haven't made a mistake in the question, in the genre. You know what happens? And that's the biggest problem that we've got, and that is to create the confusion, because it's done urgently. It's similar. Any film should be read from truth, let's say, even those that are much more fantastic or much more fantasy. Otherwise, why do we do things? I'm prepared to pay the price that it appears much more real. That a fiction film might seem like a documentary, but what we are telling is full of truth. It is loaded with truth vis-a-vis the meaning and power and the need of having to tell that story. But it's a fiction film because there's a work with actors, and there's a proposal to the narrative, and there's a development that wishes to capture the interest and to cover the expectations of an audience that's going to see a fiction film. That apart from this, we're contributing content matter that they don't know, and a perspective that nobody else is going to help, or very few people are going to help to understand from that perspective, all the better, which sometimes the documentaries have been doing it for many years. But we've taken a lot of licenses, and we have other ambitions beyond just informing or documenting a real life case. And in this sense, I think it's quite real. What's realistic is the discourse, don't you think, Antonio? Yes. Real. For me, I'm not an actor. I don't have any training as an actor, and I'd never made any film prior to this project. It was just possible from there, that is to say, of trying to tell a story which was very close to the claims that we've been making for many years, and it has to do with our day-to-day. There is a bit of a distance vis-a-vis in the character and myself. There is a difference. There are things that are perhaps of the Antonio 10 or 15 or 5 years ago, and there are others that are directly have nothing to do with me at all. But everything that wasn't being focused upon the day-to-day reality, I wouldn't have been able to try to do it. But I would like to say, Joe, that you're taking a character of one of your previous films, which is the full taxista, which is the Pepe Rovira plays that role. Why the presence of Pepe supporting this new discourse? Because there was a different political, social discourse which was different, yes, with Pepe. We've spent 11 years trying to bring to life the taxi driver again, but there was no way of finding the why to do so. These types of films are very different to separate it from life. There's no intention of achieving success or creating a product that can be causified and that can clearly be introduced into a certain market. So therefore it's easy to finance and easy to find channels so that it can be exhibited, but it just forms part of our lives. And the will of telling stories, putting something in common and to share time. Pep and I've got him, fortunately he's a very good friend of mine and an accomplice at the same time. And we thought, and in fact he got in touch, got me in touch with Antonio, and I started to try to think how we could set up. How was that, Pepe? Do you remember that? Well, in life, perhaps you want to do something and you force things to happen, and there's another thing is that you just sit back and wait. So therefore, the day-to-day life puts you in situations that means that something comes along at the end of the day. The 15th of March movement, well, that's where a lot of things emerged. And now we're talking about the influence of the 15th of March on the institutional side, but many other things emerged. Amongst all of those other things that emerged, what emerges is that Antonio and myself and other people, some that are like me and some that are like Antonio, we got to meet each other. And neither the taxi driver nor the film was in the middle of all of this meeting. But that brings about, that's what happens in the film, that brings about the film. Well, how does that happen? Well, it happens in a very harmonious way. I understand very little about films, but I do know that if a film, such as this film, you say it's a great film, marvelous film, a work of art, political film, if you say political film or social film, that's sufficient. So therefore, to highlight all of this, we did the Taxista Full, which intentionally was a film made as a false documentary or something similar, or reality cinema, I'm not too sure how to call it, but what we did with the taxi film and what we done with, in this film, Living in Other Fictions, that is to say, films which aren't evasion or adventure films. It's a film which makes the idea is to put a grain of sand and to reflect upon issues that we believe that it's necessary that we do amongst each other. The small contribution to that discussion of the revolutions that we're going to take. I'm not too sure whether there are any questions. I would like you to tell me which is the issue of the film is taboo, really. It's a big social taboo, and Antonio as well as you. But it forms part of a more ample piece of work because you've made some campaigns to make people aware about sexual assistance and so on and so forth. Could you go a bit further? The need of breaking this taboo which exists, and what it forms part of the film apart from other activities that were actions that you've carried out in the film. Well, you tell us, Antonio. Well, taboo. There's a discourse that constructs the idea of disability, and it goes from believing a series of ideas that are void, that when you knock at the door and there's nobody behind, for example, those issues of normality, there are people who believe that they are normal, and that is something that has nothing to do with what one sees in one's day-to-day, or believe that there are people that don't need other people, people that are self-sufficient, and so therefore this generates the other draw of those people like me who are dependent on others. Those types of discourse that separates into categories and wants to justify inequality this based upon differences, and they want to pretend that all of that is natural, that it doesn't seem that behind that inequality and that bad way, poor way of living, what there are political decisions and constructions that makes the community, that made by the community, and not something which is natural, that occurs in a natural way. So we've got to turn things around here, I believe. And when Jordi asked me to participate in this project, well, I was interested in it, and it captured me and it fascinated me, because after many years of carrying out social activism linked to demanding rights that have to do with material resources to be able to live my day-to-day life, for example, personal assistance, or to manage for more accessibility, transport for everyone, education for everyone, all of these things that are truly very necessary to be able to live a more livable life. After this, you also realize it's not enough just to have material things more or less covered, because at the end of the day, all of this falls to pieces if behind that there's no change in values and no change in a perspective that situates you or places you in a position, instead of looking you as if you were someone who was sick and to reduce your life to something, a sort of medical treatment. That's your life. If anyone goes to ride a horse, they're a jockey, and I'm doing it's as if I'm riding a wheelchair and I'm doing chemotherapy. To solve all of this, it requires to construct reality again through fiction in this case. And that's why projects of this nature are super necessary. That is to say, to do campaigns around the film, well, made a lot of sense, because the film is the focus, the center, shall we say, of the project. And it is a tool that we hope that will be quite powerful to open up a discourse and a debate. But it was impossible to put everything into the film. But that was the need to do other campaigns that are linked to issues that arise in the film. And apart from that, we had a great time playing around politically in the film. Well, it was a lot of fun. And I think that this has generated a certain political movement of people who have identified themselves enormously with the need to discussing that vision, and that there are only certain types of bodies that are acceptable to be considered beautiful, or to be desirable, or to enjoy pleasure. There's only one way to live sexuality. Only certain practices are legitimate. All of this, we need to question all of these issues, because at the end of the day, just like Pepper says, any revolution that doesn't go through by putting your body into the middle of it, it ends up being a void, null and void. How do we establish links to other people? It goes through the sensitive things in life, which is your body, which is how fragile life is, and we've got to. We need a big mirror so that people can look at it, no matter how uncomfortable it is for them to look. At the end of the day, I think that the film is linked to that statement, and I think that's one of the key ideas behind it, that at the end of the day, what people are bothered, not only whether it's strange, because you think it's a strange or an ugly thing, but what the difficult thing is to see your own fragility in that other person, how all of that setup that we have of what is our day-to-day life can fall to pieces at any given moment, because that's the way we are. The human condition is as such. You need always other people. So we have to assume that fantasy that we're autonomous, independent of other people, falls to pieces when we look at that part of reality that up until now has been very well hidden to these people who are not functional, functionally challenged. We're not in the educational world, either are we in the working world, we're not in the labor world, nor in the leisure world, nor in the world of cinema. We're nowhere. And so therefore, to give presence to this in every field, and to seeing that forms part of reality, not as something that occurs to a group of people, but it has to do with anyone, how they relate themselves to their body, and how we solve issues of depending and contributing to others. Well, to assume and undertake this, it requires creating tools like this film or the campaigns that we've done around the film. Luis, I would like to ask you, bearing in mind that it is a film that deals with a taboo, it's a film that talks about things people don't want to talk about. You know that you're a producer that's not afraid of things, and you've gotten involved in a very risky project, but how can we set up a project like this? And Joe Sol as well, because was it a crowdfunding campaign? Is that what you did? Could you explain how the film managed to be produced? Well, let's say the film in itself, or as all of us were an anomaly in what everything was, it's called the Spanish film industry. That, and I consider myself an anomalous within the industry after 20 years within the Spanish film industry. It's been managed to be made due to the energy of the people who have intervened and to the financing of those people through a crowdfunding have helped us for this to become a reality. But what makes me laugh is when we're talking about bothersome or inadequate discourse, it is so for those that manage. They say it's bothersome to find a distributor to premiere the film. It's bothersome for it to go to a film festival, such as in this case, something that we thank you for. It seems bothersome to make public something that to the people out in the street, when they really see it, like all of you see, it doesn't seem that bothersome, if you get what I'm saying. And I think this is the point that we have to look at. Things are changes because we are in a country, we're in a caretaker country, and I'm not too sure the European community is going to be a caretaker. We're in a moment in our society that quite fortunately things are starting to change. It'll take more or less for that to come along, but people don't believe everything that's happening and everything they're told. So that everything that we can do to support, to make less anomalous another perspective and another type of film is interesting, apart from how well the film will go. We know it'll have an audience, this film will have an audience even in festivals where don't expect to be received commercially very significantly, because otherwise we'd be very naive. But nevertheless, what we have all participated in this, we who are here on the panel and those that are in front of us here, what's quite clear in our minds is that first of all, we had to make the film, and secondly, it'll find its own path. And that's what we trust, because force and strength is much better than the old policies and being a gangster. But there have been reactions already. I've read one of your, for example, you were saying that the film had generated a certain reaction or something of the nature upon scandals that have taken place at the film. I'm not too sure whether as anyone's had reacted publicly to this, or it's essentially the idea deals with this issue. No, directly, these are reactions that have already have occurred. And that quite curiously, and as I said before, it's a film that doesn't want to put a focus upon the cinematographic side of things or artistic side of things, but no one who's seen it has any problems, whether it's too poor or not. And that is to say, all the contrary, especially where we're at nowadays vis-a-vis realism in life, I think that is not valued too much, or it shouldn't be an inconvenience. What is an inconvenience is to address that binomial between sexuality and what they consider a disability, because that idea, capacitist, for example, or capable, is cruel, and looked at from a cruel standpoint. You can't evaluate in a weighted or a just manner. So therefore, that's surprising us, and it comes from people who apparently who are very open and very capable of seeing anything, and now they're promoting films upon wars and things, but they tell you, but this is too difficult, but they're promoting films that have got to do wars. This is something that's quite incredible. And I would just like to add, it's true that the financing, there has been the participation of many, many people, which is the audience that we hope to see, and they come from a background and trajectory, not only mine, but the people that have made the film with me, but also a significant part of production from Sakti Metal, who believed and placed money in the project to make it possible, and it's finally is doing that social work that corresponded to other people, but we should deserve other conditions in which to work in, and that it's been It's done privately and in a very voluntary way. We've got time for one last question if someone wants, because our invited guests have to leave. Over here. Microphone, please. For example, how did you decide upon the title, which is very important? It's enigmatic at the same time. Who chose the title? It was chosen between everyone. So I proposed it initially. And what happened was, it was based upon discarding many things that didn't talk only about a specific problem, but upon the will of wanting to live and to find life as a difficulty that you have to encounter, because all of the discourses that come vis-a-vis being vital and living stem from the will of deprogramming life as something complex and to make it easy and to eliminate all of the complexity that might be in the middle. But in reality, we know that in that empowerment process, which is wanting to live, you confront the reality of life itself. And that's what I'm interested in looking at, and to grow along and try to share making films and many other things. Yes, can I say something? The title of the film, I think, is very appropriate, because to live, that is, it's one thing is life and one thing is to live, albeit it sounds the same, but the management of one's life, we miss living in the majority of the cases. So therefore, and as the film, it was included in the title, it's a type of a claim of a screaming out and trying to say, what we're going to tell you might possibly interest you. It might have possibly something to do with you, with your brother, with your daughter, or with your son. So therefore, perhaps, someone who's in a wheelchair, who's in a psychiatric ward, you're not too well yourself. I'm not too sure whether you know it or not, but things aren't going too well with you. That is why the reality and fiction, for example, I've come 3 years out of a psychiatric ward. That's fiction. I've not entered yet to the psychiatric ward, but I ask myself, how long are you going to take to get into the psychiatric ward, if you get what I'm saying? I'm sorry we didn't get the question. Never lose your hope. If there aren't any further questions, thank you very much to the cast and crew, and good luck. Thank you.